By 2015, humans have produced an estimated 6.5 billion metric tons of plastic waste. Last year, a plastic bag was found 36,000 feet down in Marianas Trench. 5 major spiraling heaps of trash are in our oceans, located in the Indian Ocean, South and North Atlantic, and North and South Pacific. These spiraling heaps, known as gyres, are plastic waste stuck in our oceans because of converging ocean currents. These plastics adversely affect our health, our environment, and our economy, but yet only 2 U.S. states have plastic legislation, and this legislation is only on plastic bags. This is not enough. America needs definitive legislation on all single-use plastics, including bags, utensils, and containers. First, I'm going to tell you how this plastic adversely affects our health. Monomers that leach out of plastic can be very harmful. Examples of these are BPA, BPS, vinyl, and styrene. BPA is a known endocrine disruptor. BPS has metabolic defects. Vinyl and styrene are both carcinogenic and mutagenic. These correlations have been found by revered centers such as the NCBI and the US EPA. You may not think you're being exposed to this plastic, but plastic leaches into your food by being submerged in water or exposed to UV radiation. This means by simply doing everyday tasks like dishwashing or microwaving, you could be exposing yourself to very harmful chemicals. Plastic also bioaccumulates in the food chain. So if you eat fish that have probably eaten plastic, you will also be exposed to the plastic that they have eaten. These correlations have been found, and they've been illustrated in studies such as the EPA Health Effects Notebook. But if you notice, most of these studies are listed as inconclusive, stating that we know that plastic is an endocrine disruptor and these correlations exist, but we don't know to what extent. I don't know about you, but I do not want to be the EPA's guinea pig and would rather be safe than sorry. Next, I'm going to tell you how plastic adversely affects our environment. Plastic has an increasing environmental concern in general. Plastic does not biodegrade. Instead, it photodegrades, which can take up to 1,000 years. This photodegraded plastic becomes microplastics, which animals mistake for food and eat them. This plastic makes them feel full, and they soon starve. Stories like these rarely make the news, but when they do, people fail to change their behavior and lawmakers fail to act. Most importantly, besides these biological impacts, I am also going to illustrate how plastic can adversely affect the economy. Unsightly plastic pollution has its effect on tourism, but proposed cleanup efforts do not help with this. Picking up bottles and wrappers on dry land is hard enough, but imagine if it's all floating. Cleanup efforts are only a bandage on a bigger problem. Plastic generation is only expected to go up, which means only regulation can help stop this problem. We cannot pick up the plastic fast enough to combat this issue. Next, most of the plastic in the ocean is made up of disposable products, which means that government regulation on single-use plastics could greatly reduce the amount of plastic that affects our economy. Another not as well-known effect on the economy of plastic is invasive species. Invasive species and their eggs can travel from place to place on floating plastics. Eradicating invasive species requires research on the species itself and expensive efforts to try to relocate the species. And finally, as a student of science, I realize that plastic does have its place. In science, it is very important to make sure that your instruments are sterile, and plastic helps with that, and it can be very useful. It is also useful for this reason in hospitals. But outside of these and other professional uses for plastic is largely unnecessary, especially in our everyday lives. We do not need a plastic fork when we can use a bamboo fork or a metal fork just as easily. Now, next I'm going to talk about justifications for continued use of plastic. One of these justifications is recycling. But recycling should only be viewed as part of the solution and not the solution. The recycling rate of plastic is 9%, sits at 9%. Most single-use plastics aren't even made with recycling in mind. And the market for recycled plastics is very dependent on the price of oil. When the price of oil is low, it's less expensive to make virgin plastic than to use recycled pellets. And the recycle market suffers. Recycling is also very inconsistent. You cannot recycle everything anywhere because recycling largely depends on municipalities and their resources. Another proposed justification for continued use of plastic is plastic alternatives. But these compostable plastics require specific conditions to break down, and these require expensive facilities that need to be built. And most communities currently do not have access to these facilities, nor have the resources to make expensive composting facilities for the use of plastic. Compostable and biodegradable plastics also behave the same way in the environment. They are still as much of a nuisance, and they are still as much of a nuisance and as unsightly as regular plastic. Compostable plastics and biodegradable plastics are only changed what the base of the plastic is. There are still chemicals used in the making of compostable and biodegradable plastic. This also does not solve the underlying problem of single-use plastic. Moving forward, America must make the right decision and pass definitive legislation on all single-use plastics in the best interest of our health, the environment, and the economy. I urge you to write your representatives to make them aware of this horrible problem. We cannot afford in any capacity to produce any more unnecessary plastic waste.